My mom was a terrible cook.
Okay.
One of the reasons I became a good cook, and I'll tell you how that happened. What my mom made that was good, that I loved, what were called, there's a Yiddish word called Merkhls, which meant dishes that were attributable to the dishes she learned in Europe. You know, like blintzes and gefilte fish and baking her own challahs, breads, and that kind of stuff. Those things she made were delicious. Otherwise, not a good cook at all. When I moved to California, the reason I moved is I got involved in a film project, which is my film life was a whole different thing, which I'll tell you about when you get interested in it. When I was in New York, after I got out of the Army, and I was working in New York at the time, I spent 5 years. After I had spent the 1 year, I went to college, spent a year in LA, working as an accountant, was drafted, got out in New York, started working at accounting again. I got a job working for a couple of accounting firms, one which was a very prestigious accounting firm, which I was interviewed for a whole day. I had to take exams and everything. It was very high class, had about 100 people in the firm. And every accountant was pretty good in order to get a job there. So that was the job before that I worked for the firm that, all right. During college, I had a job for the Israel bond drive, which was remember, Israel started in 1947. And the Israel bond drive in the early 50s was raising money because they had defeated. So I worked for the Israel bond drive, and I used to deliver, I was a stock boy because I was just in college at the time. And I met some very important people in the Jewish community during that. I used to deliver stuff to Golda Meir, who became the prime minister. When she was in this country, her real name was Meyerson. She was from Minneapolis. She was an American Jew who went to Israel. One weekend, she raised $50 million in New York. And then later, she became prime minister, and they said, listen, you need to take an Israeli name. You can't be using Meyerson. So she took the name Meir and became prime minister. And I used to use stuff to her. I also delivered stuff to Henry Morgan Ford Jr., who was Secretary of the Treasury for Roosevelt. And then the guys I worked for in the Israel bond drive were the guys who financed and created the arms industry, the underground arms industry, while Israel was trying to gain its, fight the Arabs. The Arabs wouldn't accept the fact that the UN had given, it was Truman, who had a Jewish partner in his haberdashery business, who gave the go-ahead for American to accept Israel as a country. So I had a kind of interesting high school and early college age. Plus, the fun I had was in dancing. That was it for me. I mean, that was my most enjoyable thing. And I had every girl I ever met who I went with, I got through dancing. It just happened.
So it started as ballroom dancing, and then you got into Latin dancing?
Yeah. And I was one of the better New York amateur dancers at the time.
Where would you go dance? Where were the big halls?
New York Palladium was the main place. But in those days, there were dances in the hotels all around New York. The Algonquin, the Riverside. During the summer, they were dancing. These bands would go up to the Catskills. Quente would play up there, and other bands. So, and I used to my father used to send my mom to the Catskills for a month every year. And I used to go there. That's where I met the owner of Ripley Clothes, who then bought Bond Clothes, and he was very wealthy. And we became friends, and he used to drive me up to the Catskills. He gave me a job. So at 14, I was packing suits on Delancey Street. Of course, my father had me working at a very young age because he wouldn't give me any money. So I've been working steadily since, 14 years, since I was about 14 years of age.
Did you see anybody you remember, like when you were going up to Catskills or in these dances, like any famous people you were running into?
Not in my hotel, but they were in the hotels around. But I used to be an entertainer as a kid, and I used to be the MC of the kid shows. And I sang and danced in Latin, Yiddish, and in Hebrew. So, and then all the old ladies wanted to dance with me, which was just awful for me. My mom, used to force me to do this.
Well, it probably taught you to dance with anybody, right?
Excuse me?
I said it probably taught you to dance with anybody. You could probably dance with anybody, young or old, whatever.
Well, I'll tell you, when I got to, when I was in New York, there were two kinds of dancers. Ones who danced on the proper beat, and ones who, for the average dancer, who really didn't have a feel for what it was to dance Latin music. Of course, to dance properly, you have to dance on a beat, which we called the two beat, which was the off beat, which is the beat that jazz is, essentially. Remember that Puerto Ricans played Latin music, but it was with a jazz bass, like Puente. I mean, although it came from Africa originally, to Cuba, to Puerto Rico, to the United States. There were Cuban bands that used to play and too. They were kind of different because they had violins in them. Most of the Puerto Ricans were percussion and brass based. Anyway, it was a lot of fun for me.